boardroom at Vantage Freightworks smelled like burnt drip coffee and the particular kind of tension that settles in a room right before someone's career gets torched for sport. And I sat at the far end of the table with my laptop open, watching the cursor blink over 6 months of work I knew, without a shred of doubt, actually worked. I had spent 5 years as the lead systems architect for a logistics startup that promised to reinvent freight routing. And for every one of those years, I had been the quiet reason the promise didn't collapse into vaporware the moment real customers started using it. Standing at the whiteboard, markers squeaking with theatrical confidence, was Preston Callahan, the 26-year-old son of our founder, who had been installed as Chief Technology Officer exactly 5 days earlier, despite having never shipped a single line of production code in his life. "Mara, I've been looking at this Helix Core module," he announced, jabbing a laser pointer at my routing architecture diagram like it had personally offended him. "And frankly, it reads like bloat someone forgot to delete." And the room went dead silent because every engineer at that table knew Helix Core was the reason our platform could reroute 10,000 shipments in real time without buckling under its own weight. I kept my voice level and explained, for what felt like the 100th time, that the module bypassed 3 layers of legacy database calls and cut our response latency from nearly 4 seconds down to under 60 milliseconds. Which was the entire reason Meridian Dynamics was still circling us for a $320 million acquisition. Preston just smiled the way people smile when they've already decided facts don't apply to them, walked to the console mirrored on the wall screen, and said, "We need something lean for the demo, something my dad can actually show investors without an engineering degree," while his fingers hovered over keys he had no business touching. I stood up and told him plainly that if he deleted that directory, the staging environment would collapse within the hour because auto-deploy was still armed for tomorrow's investor walkthrough. And he looked at me with the particular contempt of a man who has never once had to fix what he breaks, said, "That's exactly the obstructionist thinking we're moving past." And then, with a flourish that belonged in community theater, he selected the folder, hit delete, and pushed the change straight to production, while the whole room watched the terminal scroll green text into silence. The quiet afterward wasn't ordinary quiet. It was the specific ringing vacuum that follows a controlled demolition, and I felt strangely calm as I explained to the room that the application was now an empty shell that couldn't authenticate a single user or fetch a single shipment record, at which point Preston spun toward me, red-faced, and announced in front of everyone that I was a culture problem and that security would walk me out before the sprint review even ended. My phone had been buzzing quietly in my bag for 3 weeks straight, with calls from a number I finally recognized as Meridian Dynamics. And as Preston ranted about fresh perspectives and disruptive minimalism, I picked up the call, looked him dead in the eye, and told the VP of engineering on the other end that I accepted their offer effective immediately, watching Preston's smirk curdle into confusion as I unplugged my laptop charger and walked out without giving my old team or the burning building I was leaving behind a single backward glance. I already knew Helix Core handled every authentication token in the system, which meant that within roughly 50 minutes, once the cached credentials expired, Preston would find himself locked out of the very admin panel he'd used to fire me, trapped inside a company he had just gutted with his own hands. By the time I reached Meridian's glass-walled headquarters overlooking the bay, their VP of engineering, a sharp, unhurried man named Dorian Ash, was already sliding a tablet across the table, showing me the real reason they'd wanted Vantage all along, a plan called Project Compass they'd intended to build on stolen infrastructure, but now wanted to build, honestly, with me running architecture from day one. Over the following weeks, I watched the collapse unfold secondhand through a group chat I'd nicknamed the lifeboat, with 3 former teammates who'd stayed behind out of loyalty or fear, reading messages about servers spinning into infinite crash loops, about Preston trying to hand-edit configuration files in a plain text editor at 3 in the morning, and about a demo day where Vantage's team, unable to rebuild the routing engine, resorted to faking the entire dashboard with static files pulled from last year's data just to have something to show investors. That fraud unraveled in real time when a Meridian lawyer sitting in on the demo simply asked to see live throughput for the previous quarter, and Preston, unable to produce anything because there was no backend left to query, panicked and tried to fake the numbers through his browser's developer console in front of the entire investment committee, prompting the lawyer to stand up and announce flatly that the application wasn't making a single real network request and the deal was dead on the spot. 2 weeks later, over coffee in a rain-soaked cafe, my old teammate Devin told me the venture backers had frozen every account the moment they learned the demo was staged, that the emergency backups were gone because Preston had quietly canceled the storage subscription to trim costs right before firing me, and that the team was now manually running database queries and emailing spreadsheets to customers by hand just to keep the illusion of a working product alive a little longer. I slid him a Meridian business card across the table and told him the ship was sinking and it was time to stop bailing water, and within a month he, along with 2 other engineers I'd vouched for, had jobs on my new team building Project Compass the right way. Vantage's founder, a man named Walter Callahan, who had once called me indispensable and then let his own son gut everything I'd built, tried one last desperate legal maneuver, serving Meridian with a lawsuit accusing me of sabotage and planting malicious code before my departure, a claim that fell apart within minutes of a deposition once Meridian's legal team produced commit logs showing Preston's own fingerprints on every fatal keystroke. Walter sat across that table looking smaller with every passing second, and when he finally asked me, voice cracking, whether the module he'd let his son delete had really been the foundation of everything, I told him the truth as gently as I could manage, which was that it had never been bloat at all. It had been the only thing holding the entire structure upright. 6 months after Vantage filed for bankruptcy, its liquidation team reached out to Meridian in desperation, needing someone with the original encryption keys to unlock historical customer records, trapped in an archive for a tax audit, and I found myself back in that same empty office, dust outlines still marking where my monitors used to sit, quietly decrypting 5 years of data I had built and protected, long before anyone thought to thank me for it, closing the door on that chapter not with bitterness, but with the calm certainty that comes from watching something collapse exactly the way physics always said it would once you removed its foundation. Project Compass launched 18 months later, processing more shipments per second than Vantage ever managed at its peak. And as I stood in Meridian's command center watching gold light trace real transactions across a live world map, I finally understood that the best revenge was never the collapse of the people who underestimated me. It was simply building something so solid that nobody would ever get the chance to delete it again. And if this story of quiet competence outlasting loud arrogance resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family, because we create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.